I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo del Real, here with a very special guest today. Normally it's Mr. Nick Hodge, but today I have none other than the chairman and CEO of one of the, what I believe is going to be one of the single most exciting exploration plays of the next 3, 5, and maybe even 10 years. I'm speaking, of course, of Mr. Michael Hudson from Hannan Metals. This is typically a weekly therapy session, Mike, that Nick and I like to have, where we vent and we rant and we rave and we talk all things market. We like to call it investing in Bizarro World. Today, we're going to talk about why I'm so excited about Hannan Metals, why I've written the largest check of my career. And, you know, I think it's going to be a fun conversation. The history is phenomenally interesting to me. But before we get into that, I have to extend the same courtesy to you that I always extend to Mr. Hodge. How are you today, Senor Hudson?
I'm very well, thank you, Gerardo. And yourself?
I am excellent. I am excited for the second half of this year. I'm excited for 2025. I almost feel like Hannan and the team, and me by default, right, through you, has pulled off a coup in Peru, except it's one of the good ones, not the ones typically associated with Peru. And the reason I say that is somehow Michael Hudson, Lars, the team at Hannan, has managed to become a top 10 land tenure holder in Peru. It has a market cap of roughly $35 to $40 million, give or take $5 million, depending on where we close today. And yet every other company that's on that list, they're mostly billion and multi-billion dollar companies. So when I say I feel like we pulled off a coup, I mean, how are you able to stake so much land without anyone noticing? And it's somewhat of a hypothetical question, but I want to get into the history of how this land package came to be, and then we'll talk about why we think it's so special.
Yeah, so where do we start to make it interesting, quick, but give you enough detail, I suppose? Way back in the 90s, I worked in Peru. That's where I cut my loincloth, if you can say that, if that translates across the Pacific, and got to know Peru a fair bit, got to know a lot of people, got to know the opportunities. I was working with a major company, the largest zinc company in the world, actually, at the time, and then I went into receivership, as zinc companies tend to after a little while, and it happened while I was in Peru. So myself and my business partner, I work very closely with, Mark Saxon, we bought the database from the receivers of that major company, and that was 10 years of exploration. So it all immediately gave us the resources of a major company for a couple of geos, right, in their 30s at the time, and then we've just had business in Peru over the years. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I caught up with a good friend, another guy in the industry, Tim Moody, who was running exploration for Rio Tinto in the day in Peru. And we were just having a beer. He said, listen, we're in our 40s and we know the industry, people can back us. Yes, we look at some old legacy projects and we've done all that game, but how can we really make the big discoveries? Now's the time. And, we love discovery. That's what turns our crank, Look, just behind, maybe you can't see because there's AI camera, but behind me is a metal detector. So, I love the thrill of discovery, even if it's just finding a little nugget in the field to finding the biggest copper deposit on Earth. And Tim said, we were exploring in Peru. You remember that sediment-hosted system we were looking at? So yes, I did. And we went back and looked at it and staked the ground, and then we got the Japanese government involved in the JV there, and then we said, whoa, we've got a JV, but I know the capital markets pretty well, and I know you want to give investors the talk. A JV for me is de-risks the project, but it takes away the upside. Okay, so it's good to have a mix, and then we went back to the database, thought about these potential, well, there's a lot of gold out on the other side of the Andes, and we can talk about that. And that we're on the other side of the Andes in the high jungle, and then we started doing a bit of work during COVID. Put experts on the ground who we've known, who know a little bit of a rock from here to here, and we did big stream sediment surveys and big swing mag surveys, and we found a new porphyry belt, and it's the right age, and there's 18 porphyries sticking out of the ground. We appear to have some monsters, all very early stage, and Peru's been very slow to permit. But and now we've got Teck as a 9.9% holder, and they're there because they love the porphyry epithermal skarn. So it's a whole system. It's not just a couple of round porphyries we've got, and they're copper gold, which is really interesting. So there's a bit of the background from experience to getting to where we are today.
You said a couple of key phrases there that stood out to me. 18 copper gold porphyries, multiple mineralization styles, big scale. And anytime I think about writing a check and I look at what's the potential upside, I'm an optimist by nature. I think you know that about me by now, Mike. And so when I start looking at what Hannan has been able to put together here in Peru, and you mentioned having an entire belt, I see the potential for many company making discoveries, multiple over and over again in different types of systems with commodities that, by the way, happen to be either hitting record highs or likely on their way there, predominantly copper gold, and then of course silver exposure as well. You talked about the age of the rocks and why it's uncommon in this part of Peru, and probably why it was largely ignored. Can we get to why you think initially, and this part is interesting, right? It can be part of a movie, why people initially stayed away from this belt and hence led to you being able to stake it and discovering it. And then can we talk about the age of the rocks and why that's so important, so unique in this part of Peru?
Well, it was a hard area. So I actually was in those areas. So in Peru, you have three very different areas. You got the jungle. Sorry, well, let's go the other way. You got the desert. You got the Pacific, the desert, the high mountains or the Sierra, and then the jungle, and intermittent between the Sierra and the Amazon basin is the high jungle. So it's still all the rocks that are forming in that magmatic arc, but they've got a lot more trees on them, and they're lower. They're not like at 4,500 to 5,000 meters at the top of the Sierra. Now, all that high jungle area was hard, really hard. In the day, when I say in the day, I talk in the day was in the 90s, and I went in there with military support because they were narco trafficking cocoa, some of the biggest cocoa growing areas in the world during that period of time, and that ended about 20 years ago. I remember when your government was in there trying to shut that down, and I met a number of them at the time. And it's changed dramatically. The infrastructure has changed dramatically as a consequence because it's brought a lot of people into those areas from the Sierra. It's a much easier place to live and work. And I imagine that's how it is for the local people too. There's water and food, and the land gives a lot more. So it's changed, where you used to go in with helicopters, you're driving in now, and we just drive to every project. Haven't used a helicopter in Hannan at all, other than to fly the airborne surveys. So instead, they're making geophysical surveys. So everyone thought it was too hard, and it seemed that way through history. And then nobody had done the work. So the local people out there had seen all the oil exploration. Some of the largest oil companies have been there from the 70s, and just by definition, the 70s people weren't treated very well. We go in very differently these days as mining or exploration companies, and it used to be a simple conversation like, we're here, this is what we're going to do, in the 70s, 80s, and perhaps into the 90s, and now it's, hello, we're here, this is what we'd like to do, can we come on? And that's a very different conversation. And so there's been a bit of recovery from those oil guys, but there's a lot of new people, like I said there. So whether they're new or got their past to rely on. A lot of social work's been required to educate what we're doing, and that's taken 2 to 3 years. So that's a big change. So everyone thought it was too hard, and that if it was so easy, everybody would be doing it, right? In anything you do in life, and there was a lot of people who said, "There's no way you're ever going to succeed," right? There was a lot of publicity and press, and when we started taking these big swings, and now we've got permits out there, and we've got overwhelming support from the local people, and poco a poco, little by little, where we've made the responsible entry into that area of bringing people along with us.
You talked about the geophysics and the mag work, and that's been really critical in discovering a lot of these up to 18 porphyries on the Valiente, the 100% owned side of the project, or the many projects within the Valiente project, as I like to look at it, right? But Valiente itself is just over 1,000 square kilometers. It's a porphyry gold, copper gold belt that has never been explored. I looked through the presentation. There's copper boulders copper's just oozing out of the walls and out of the boulders. And it's really phenomenal to me, because all I hear from CEOs is, well, Gerardo, there's not any more outcropping copper gold porphyries just sticking out anymore. You really got to go down under. And here you have an entire belt. And the challenge right now is, the way that I understand it from our conversations, the challenge is really prioritizing the mini targets. I don't think a discovery is whether or not a discovery happens is the question. I think the question is likely, and then you can tell me if this is accurate, Mike. We want to make sure that we're swinging at the best pitches per se, right? And make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck early on. Can we start by talking about Valiente? Because I want to emphasize to people that may be new to the story that there's two different projects, right? San Martin is a different type of system. That's the joint venture with Jogmec, where they can earn up to 75%. Valiente is 100% owned. Can you speak to the differences there? And can you speak to the mag work and how important that has been in defining these and discovering these porphyries?
For sure. So I didn't answer a question before. What age of the rocks? They're Miocene porphyries. They shouldn't be out there. So these are young porphyries. They should be near the magmatic arc, where the ocean is hitting the continental crust and you're forming the Andes. These are young. Miocene is relatively young, so the older rocks should be out here, and they progress to the younger rocks as the arc develops. So there's big structures bringing these younger porphyries way out east from where they should be. And in terms of the porphyries, well, there's two very different targets, just to make sure that I express that. There's the sediment-hosted system, which is the JV with Jogmec. That's a few hundred, 200 to 300 kilometers north. That's 100 plus kilometers of sediment hosted. Now they're like pancakes. That's the second most prolific form of copper mined in the world today. That's the coup, or the African copper belt, and they're pancakes, and they form over extensive areas. It's very thin, but extensive and consistent. That's that style. Whereas porphyries, of course, the intrusions. So it goes south. That's 100% owned area. These things are sticking out of the ground, and you are right. And that's a bit of a challenge, because the exploration is not easy.
Right.
We're getting into areas that are brand new. We've got literally 10 geologists on the ground with support staff. So we'd have over 20 people on the ground, because you've got to cut your way through jungle and find areas that have never been found before. And it's not going on off somebody was here in the past, and so it's little by little exploration. So you don't have the whole story. And geologists and geology is all about making big assumptions from little bits of data, and we're collecting bit by bit. But we want to find the best grade. There's no doubt there's porphyries, but what is the best grade project, and what's the best commodity mix? Because they do vary from what we say are these alkaline porphyries, which are more copper, to the alkaline porphyries, which are more copper gold. I'd love to go to the copper. Obviously, the copper gold will be more attractive in this day and age, and the major gold companies are all taking big swings, as well as the copper companies, into those areas. Uh, and and I think we have found the monster, which we call it internally, which is Previsto, that footprint of that system. Yeah, and we've only got onto that over the last 4 or 5 months, and you'll see the news flow there. Notwithstanding, there's another project called Baleine where we're getting very further advanced to getting to drill permitting, and we'll be drilling that one first. And that's 2 porphyries and an epithermal system over 12 kilometres. So it's not absent of scale or grade at surface. And then, what's the grade is everything we see at surface is leached from the weathering. So it will be upgraded at depth, but what's the upgrade is the question. And we've got some good rules of thumb to suggest that we think that these things very much have the potential to have economic grades, but we've got to get the drill rigs in there.
When you casually mention 12-kilometer areas, right, with Velen and these 2 targets, and how rich potentially those could be, and you kind of skim over that when you mentioned Previsto, right? What makes Previsto so special? I don't want to gloss over Belen because that'll likely see the first 100% owned drilling, correct?
Correct.
And just to be absolutely clear, there definitely is the potential for some pretty spectacular discoveries at those targets.
Absolutely, they're half million to 600 to 700 million in the top 400 to 500 meter ton targets. So and then there's an epithermal system over 3 kilometres shedding boulders at grades you want to see that are mineable grades. So that in an epithermal system. So it's a wonderful target anyhow. But you mentioned it before, we're going to have permit on all of these. So for the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be drilling off these. We've got to have that strategic discussion as to what we should focus on, what we should farm out. We did a JV up in the copper, sediment-hosted copper system. We didn't want any more JVs, so Teck were very, very keen to come in, and they love the porphyry story. So bringing them in at 9.9%, very good partner, passive but advising, and also we're not selling the farm at 9.9%. So we've got, do we bring in other equity? So we've got to do all that, but let's get the drill holes in the ground. Let's get the cost of capital down at 40 or 50 million, whatever, I'm talking Canadian now. Is way too cheap to go and drill these things, right? Raise money at those levels with ferocity. So we've got to make those initial discoveries, and that we will. And but that comes to drilling the best parts early, which that's our day-to-day job, learning, making those decisions.
As far as Previsto, tell me what makes that area merit the description of the monster, because again, it's one thing for Gerardo Del Real to say, and I'm not a geologist. I haven't dated, the rocks. I haven't been on the ground. I will be there in September, by the way, and I'm really excited for that. And thank you and the team in advance for hosting. But it's one thing for me to look at this and go, holy smokes, there's copper and gold all over the place. I cannot wait for the drill bit. It's going to go gangbusters, right? It's another thing for Michael Hudson and the team internally, and so some of the top experts in the world, to all be describing this Previsto area as the monster. What makes it so special? What is it about that specific area that stands out so much more? Because I went back to news releases from 2021, 2022-ish, and there was excitement even back then when you first accessed the area. It was clear to the team, at least, in me reading the language, that you already thought that was going to be the most fertile ground that to date you've discovered. What is it that makes it so special?
It scale, basically, and grade. So early days, okay, let's put all this in perspective, that we haven't got a drill hole here. This is grassroots exploration. But, these things have a footprint at surface, and you say for the Ricardo Herrera, which is one porphyry that we have in that Baleine trend where we're going to be the first to drill, that's something like 700 to 800 meters by a kilometer footprint. That's pretty, reasonable scale for a porphyry. That's sort of, I haven't done the stats, but I'd say, it's the median size, so it's not small. Right? It's
no.
But Previsto, is something like a 5 by 10 kilometer magnetic target with a potassic anomaly from the radiometrics over it. And that's the largest scale we know to date. And we were in there in 2021, 22. You just mentioned the dates there, but we didn't have the permission socially in the large scale. And we said, let's hold back. Let's do this properly. We've got other areas, and that's the beauty on working in lots of different projects. We're not reliant and going, Mr. Landholder or municipality or whoever the authorities we're talking to, we need to get in tomorrow. No, we'll do this in a proper and sensible way because we had other areas that we got in earlier this year. And now we're just starting to do all that mapping, prospecting, soil sampling. We're going to go in there in later this year and do a massive, like 8 to 10 kilometre, 2 massive IP lines, geophysics, that will show us the third dimension. So we've got kilometres of semi-ore grain soils, like 0.1 and above gold, which is unusual, right, to find. And then we're finding, outcrops and beautiful oxide copper, and they look like blue or something out of Aladdin, right, or something out of Disney, right? They're just amazing. But the outcrops are rare because the jungle covers a lot. So we're going to go and fly a big LiDAR survey, which will give us the detail and finding those outcrops and perhaps a lot more structure in the logistics. So yeah, scale and grade, and this is sort of the similar scale to some of the biggest porphyries in the world. You put it the Previsto, early stage next to Escondida, the biggest porphyry in the world, and they're pretty much similar in scale. But a lot more work to do to prove that it is that system. But you don't find them at this scale.
Walk me through. I know the one pushback I've received from people when I mention the quality, the scale, the technical team, the social license goodwill that you've developed over the years, how carefully and methodically you've advanced that social license and how you're very protective of it. When I mention all of that, the pushback that I always get is, but Peru and permitting in Peru. And I can't help but notice that not just with Hannan here recently, but several other companies that I follow that finally are starting to see, I don't want to call it accelerated, but definitely a more efficient permitting process in place where it looks like structure and clarity is now being communicated to the people that are willing to allocate capital in the region. And look, let's be clear. Peru is still, I believe, the world's second top copper producer. Its economy is dependent on this. Peru wants capital. It wants successful exploration. I think there were a few years at the very least where there wasn't any consistency as far as the personnel goes. But I say all that to say, how would you respond to people that question the efficiency of the permitting process in Peru? And where is that now as you see it today?
Green shoots is the simple way I'd say. We've got a pendulum that swings both ways in jurisdictions. The pendulum certainly swung to the difficult end in Peru over the last 5 or 6 years. That's certainly swinging back. You've got to do all those things from the grassroots level, have those social support, etc. If you don't, then you've got nothing, and that we do, and we've worked very hard at that, as you mentioned. Simple things like the Minister of Mines has come to a couple of meetings in the local area that have related to our projects over the last 2 or 3 months. So high-level support from government, and they've changed some of the legislation. Still not an easy place, but green shoots, and we're starting to see now permits that took 2 years in the San Martin JV with Jogmec are coming along, and we're at similar-ish stages after about 8 to 9 months. So things are starting to appear. I don't want to over-egg it because we've got to get those final signatures, but from a high level government support to seeing the systems develop, the permits develop much quicker. The departments are willing to engage much more, and they've got the message from the top that they must make these things faster, or the dollars are fungible. They'll go elsewhere. It's not just us.
Sure.
So it's absolutely on the improve, and it's been a great place variably to work over the years. I mean, I've been there since the 90s, and these are swings and roundabouts, and we're coming back.
You mentioned tech, 9.9%, I believe. We talked about the joint venture with JOGMEC. I have to believe that with the number of potential company making discoveries at this belt, it's rare to have a whole belt, right? That this belt holds. I have to believe that major mining companies are having discussions with you, at least at the earliest of stage, to match the early stage nature of the projects, about looking at these things and glossing over. And obviously, I know I've known you for a while now, Mike. I know you're not going to give me any names, but how would you label the willingness or the enthusiasm of major mining companies to keep an eye on the developments here in what's frontier exploration at its finest, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, we get lots of tire kickers, people who want to go, oh, you're interested in what we're doing, and I'd love to do a deal. But we get a bit grey behind the eyes. It genuinely will engage with anyone, but they've got to be serious around engaging. So we have very large confidentiality areas of interest, so people just can't come in and just do little deals around the permit areas, which are relatively small compared to the larger area. And then that just tests the mettle of how serious somebody is to come in. So that's what we made very clear to everybody. And some companies have come in and done that, and others see through the game and move on, which is fine. But we're not ready to take anybody else on in this project. We're going to advance this and get those drill holes in the ground. We've got some very good partnerships. The largest company in Canada, mining company in Canada, the Japanese government, and they're great partners, and we don't need to dilute it further today.
It's exactly the answer I was hoping to hear as a biased, happy shareholder and one that is eager to see the story unfold. Walk me through, Mike, the second half of this year or the next 6 to 12 months, what you hope to see in terms of the order of the work that will be done. And then, of course, the $1 million question, right, is always what gets drilled when. And I know you're going to underpromise, and I'm hoping you overdeliver, but give me your conservative timeline of what the news flow should look like over the next 6 to 12 months.
Well, we're finally getting there, Gerardo. I would have said to you, and I have said to you, we're taking big swings. We're going to make some big discoveries here. It's looking amazing, but put the shares in your back pocket if you're going to buy Hannan, because Peru is slow. But now we've really broken the back of that system, and I'm very thankful to the team we've got in Peru. And you mentioned at the start, and I talk to you a lot, but there's an amazing group of people led by Kathy Vargas, who I've worked with since the mid-90s, and Lars Dahlenbori especially, and Fernando Alva, and a huge group of social licensing people and geologists who've made all this happen. So we were granted the DIA in San Martin earlier this year. We're just doing a few more things to get that permit granted. There's a few more eyes on us there. There's a bit of political opposition locally, so that the administrators are dotting the I's and T's. So we're probably going to get rigs on the ground there in October, is the best estimate I can give you today. And we've got a 2,000 metre program initially, backed up by another 2,000 metres if we like the rocks we see in San Martin. And now here's the big one, Balen, the Ricardo Herrera Sortilegio Vista Alegre porphyry-linked epithermal system is advancing very quickly through the Peruvian system. What we did was we put the DIA in there in January, and then we had a number of observations come back much quicker, like 18 months quicker than what we've had before. And then we've answered those observations, which is a normal part of the process. Last week we had the water survey completed. That went well. There's nothing else to answer. So now that's gone back into the authorities, and it's ready to be ready, and absent of another round of observations, etc., ready to be granted. So that Balen area and the 100% owned Valiente area could be permitted, within the similar timeframes to San Martin, in Q4 this year.
Yes, year.
Yes. And then Previsto, the monster. Well, that's we're working out how best to to understand and unravel that system. 4 by 10 kilometers in the jungle is a big area to find the best parts of, and we're doing a lot of that LiDAR and IP and 10 geos on the ground to try and find the best parts of that system, and probably be in a position to start permitting that this year. We've had the minister, as I may have mentioned, from the federal government of mines come to support us at the local area in San Martin. So that top level support is coming down. We've got the grassroots level support, very much by years of working very hard, incredibly with all the stakeholders. So green shoots.
So it sounds to me like San Martin was more of an effort to get across the finish line, and we're almost there. It almost sounds to me like Baristo and Belen and Ricardo Herrera, this area seems to be a lot more streamlined in both the support politically and the lack of any local opposition. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think it is. I think we're getting better at knowing what to do. I think the authorities are getting better because we're going to these areas that haven't been explored before. So it's a suck and see for everybody. There is certainly, we see a lot less of that local opposition that we see in San Martin, and I'm talking a few people, but they bang very hard against the table, whereas we don't have that in Valiente, and I think, but the major thing is that Peru has changed, and they've realised that they had an unworkable system, and we've been able to keep it going for a couple of years as we've been making these discoveries, and when you look back, you can change history and the way you view things, but without that urgency, if you like, to get to drilling because of the slow permitting, that the social license has worked in our favour, right? Because we haven't had to push people beyond what they're comfortable with. So that actually is the secret in the social work. I talked about the different discussions, but if you say to somebody, "Well, we're here, we're going to be working with you. Let's do it in your time frame," and if you don't want us here, we'll be gone. They're very different discussions to we're here and we're doing this like at the lumpet, and that time frame has given us the ability to have those kind of discussions, and the multiple targets that we've got have given us the opportunity to have those discussions, and now we're starting to work in areas that the information passes that these are good people, they're doing what they say they're doing, the work is low level, etc., and they're giving us jobs and a lot of social programs and all that kind of thing that you need to do to be a responsible company.
The last time we spoke publicly, you talked about waiting with bated breath for assays from some of the surface work at Baristo. How is that coming along?
You'll see more data every 3 to 4 weeks. And I think we had a press release not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, because we work on a 2 week on in the field, 1 week compiling all the data, and then 1 week off roster with the technical team. So we're making big strides every month, and having 10 geos on the ground there as we pulled geos off the San Martin area while we're waiting for those final permitting. The whole team is in Previsto. So it's a big area. It warrants that kind of exercise. And there's not too many 10 geo teams in Peru. Obviously, the majors would cover that. But this is a serious exploration effort, and it warrants it.
How much of the Valiente side, the 100% owned, how much of that land has actually been explored? Have you actually gotten to?
So Previsto, the target area itself, we're 20% into that discovery today.
It's incredible.
And we're I've got a 4 by 2 kilometer anomaly to date, and 3 kilometers away there's another kilometer by kilometer. So, but anyhow, there's lots of kilometers left. We've maybe explored 5 of the 18 porphyries in any detail. So that's one measure. So and there'll be more as we do the work, right? So this is going to be a major copper producing area for the world if everything works. Caveat emptor, around the exploration, around the permitting, around the social side, around the engineering that will eventually come miles away. But this, over the next 10, 20, 30 years will be, generational changing. This will help the world decarbonize. It will be a major part of the world's copper production if it all comes to be, because it's a huge area and lots of projects to be unraveled here.
Mike, it's been a pleasure. It always is. Anything to add to the discussion?
No, I don't think so. It's thanks for the opportunity. I've listened to your podcast with great interest, and now here I am. You got me out of bed here in Australia, so you maybe I've just warmed up as the morning's gone on. You can see it's now light out here. So thank you. Thanks for your support, and keep an eye on everything we're doing, from the social, technical to the drilling and onwards and upwards.
Thank you for your time. Much like you, Mike, I am eager to get the drills turning. I love the methodical approach that you're taking. There is I don't have another favorite way to add value than drilling and making discoveries, much like you, right? And so I absolutely can't wait. I think you're looking like a modern day Indiana Jones here from down under, and I think the next several years will prove that out. I'm always supposed to remind everybody to go to dailyprofitcycle.com/subscribe for all content related things, including Bizarro World. This was the 275th episode of what's normally our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. It was an absolute pleasure to do a special edition with Mr. Michael Hudson from Hannan Metals. Have a great, great week, everybody. And if anything, follow the story just for how exciting it's going to be to see this news develop, because I think it's going to be the single best exploration play of the next 3 to 5 years. Have a good one, everybody.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.